Chapter 15. Marianne woke with a Monday morning feeling, no matter that for her most days were the same. Perhaps it was the small sense of dread at what she might find in her kitchen when she opened up the bunkhouse. With Sunday her official night off, unless it was a bank holiday weekend, Alice was on kitchen duty for soup and cold snacks, and clearing up was a communal and often a haphazard affair. Most of the archaeologists knew the routine well enough, having spent half the summer there, and Roger was usually good with his lot. The only unknown quantity were the two walkers, Martin and the inscrutable Joe. She thought again about how he'd chatted to her the day that he'd shown her the phone. More words than she'd had out of him in the time he'd been there. Maybe he just wasn't good in company. As if summoned by her thoughts, Joe was in the yard when she passed the gate to the camping field, sitting on the low wall by the equipment barn, hand curled around a half-lit roll-up, its tobacco smoke harsh in the morning air. It had rained overnight, and the earth had a rich, fresh smell, mushrooms and chocolate and crushed leaves, like the mud pies she had made as a child. Tails waving, the dogs rushed ahead to greet him, and he rubbed their necks as if they were old friends. Marianne frowned, puzzled by the irritation that niggled her. "You're out and about early," she said, opening the gate to the dog's run and whistling them in. Maggie the lurcher lingered, reluctant to leave her new best friend, and Joe, perhaps reading the frustration in Marianne's face, pushed her gently away. "I like being up early," he said. "I used to surf in the mornings at home. Sometimes, anyway." With his voice came the scent of waves at dawn, the sun creeping above the horizon. First a pale gold-pink glow, then a blaze of red as a ball of fire clambered out of the sea. Marianne felt the sink of her toes into cool sand, the dune grass sharp beneath her feet, and shivered. But that was in another country, and besides, the wench is dead. "Are you leaving us today?" she asked, ready to remonstrate as he crushed the cigarette beneath his boot, but he took a tin from his pocket and put the flat white butt into it, closing it with a snap. "Martin's heading off, I think. I might stay a bit longer. Been watching those hooded crows up by the Devil's Chair. Getting some stuff for my dissertation." "You're a student?" She had assumed that he was a surveyor like his friend, interested in geology. "Zoology. Family habits of corvids." So much that she could say. Had he heard the jackdaws in the copse by Lower Farm, or seen the tree trunks split and crammed with sticks in their winter nesting site? But it was time to be getting breakfast on, and anyway he made her uneasy, the way he fixed her with his strange silver-grey eyes. As she let herself in through the front door, his voice followed her. "Can I take your dogs for a walk?" She stopped on the threshold, jarred as though someone had caught her by the collar of her jacket. "I don't think... They're not used to walking with anyone else. Maggie's a rescue." It was hardly a good excuse. "She likes me," he said. "She does, but... maybe if they knew you a bit better." He shrugged, his face blank as usual. "Doesn't matter. Just an idea." He turned and walked towards the track, boots scuffing the cinder surface. Marianne left her wellies in the rack and shoved her feet into slippers, breathing in the familiar fug of hearty food and outdoor living. She had breakfast well on the way, the tea and coffee already on the hatch when Donald paid his usual morning visit. The morning before, he'd been full of Georgie Fraser's visit to the dig, chuntering on about her interest in Sam and how he would have to keep an eye on her, make sure she wasn't intimidating his team. Today he was more his normal self, a little too keen to please, a little too interested in how well she had slept. Not well, as it happened, but then she rarely did. He had left for the dining room, and she'd exchanged the routine morning greetings with Roger in his fresh blue shirt, when Russell knocked at the kitchen door, opening it tentatively, as though he'd learned his technique from Donald. "I don't suppose you've seen Lucy, have you?" "Not yet," she said, sliding a tray of potato cakes out of the oven to keep hot on top of the Rayburn. "Have you lost her?" She said it lightly, and saw from his face that her tone was not what he needed.
"I think she went out for a walk while I was still asleep. She's not back yet. I tried calling her, but she's not answering."
"I was out doing the donkeys by 6:30 and no one passed the cottage. Do you know when she went out?" Russell shrugged and ran a hand through his hair, giving himself a calf lick.
"She's not been sleeping well since, well, you know. I think it's got to her because she'd met her, Anna. She just wants to finish the course and go home."
Marianne nodded. She gave the eggs one last whisk and tipped them into the pan, remembering how distressed Lucy had been on Saturday afternoon. "Maybe she went down the farm and up to the church that way. She might have meant to do a circular route and come back down past my house. It takes longer than people think." Russell thanked her and closed the kitchen door, relieved to have found a solution, even if he didn't quite believe it. There was a steady hum from the dining room now, and whilst the eggs settled, she ferried toast to the hatch, lifted the trays of sausages and bacon from the lower oven, and set them on the counter with the potato cakes. Chairs scraped on the wood floor as people got to their feet, eager to be first to the hot food, but usually too well-mannered to push. The older archaeologists were still at their table, Wiltshire Sam looking grey-faced and shadowy-eyed, in earnest conversation with Helen Ajayi. Donald caught her watching and winked, provoking a flush of irritation followed by guilt. Why she was being so snippy with him she didn't know, unless it was some kind of despair. He was a nice man, a good man. She wished he'd just give up on her and find someone else to moon over. Perhaps he was the kind of man who only yearned for the unobtainable. Maybe that was why archaeology attracted him, longing to get his hands on the past, knowing that he would only ever find tantalising traces. Roger seemed to have taken on the role of dining room supervisor, making sure his trainees sampled all the major food groups, encouraging them to take fruit for later if they didn't want it now. Russell was still disconsolate. She supposed she could hardly blame him for being worried, and of Lucy there was no sign. Joe Ingalls was missing too, and didn't appear until Marianne was making her first round of the dining room, replacing toast racks and clearing away used cereal bowls. He joined his usual table, Martin too deep in conversation with pink-haired Claire. Was there a burgeoning romance there? To give much in the way of acknowledgement. Joe didn't seem to mind. He liked to be an outsider, she thought. Didn't run with the pack. Alice was late, something to do with her nan's carer being stuck in traffic around Minsterley, and was tugging on her apron, knotting the strings around her waist as Marianne re-entered the kitchen.
"And did you hear the rain overnight?" Alice said. "It was bad over our way."
Marianne had heard it, had even been out in it, although she didn't say so to Alice. Alice, like Donald, lectured her about her habit of going walking in the small hours when sleep eluded her.
"You might break your ankle up there in those rocks," she'd say. "And what about that devil in his chair?"
That Marianne always had the dogs with her didn't seem to reassure either of them, and she supposed they were right. Both dogs were more likely to lie morosely by her side than to rush for help like Lassie. But walking in darkness and rain was surely better than waking the young diggers and begging a joint from them, or raiding Roger's supply of single malt whisky. He kept a crate in the equipment store, both of which had occurred to her. Perhaps she needed to go to meetings again. The discovery of Anna Price's body, Joe Ingalls presenting her with the phone, his watchful eyes asking questions she didn't understand, D.I. Fraser questioning her with that searching look she had, all had combined to upset her hard-won equilibrium, reminding her that while she might feel herself to be on firm ground, she only ever teetered on a tightrope. She might forget the yawning chasm beneath, but it was always there. While Alice made a start on the washing up, Marianne took an empty olive oil drum out to the barn where Roger stored his equipment. He liked to use the cans for his team-building days where participants would make rafts and cross the River Onny down near Craven Arms. It was warm in the yard, the sun conjuring steam from the puddles, though it was not yet 9 o'clock. When she got back in, she must have a word with Martin Davis to confirm whether he was leaving. Judging by the way he'd had his head together with Claire, it wouldn't surprise her if he stayed another day, even if he must have exhausted the walks from the bunkhouse. Maybe Donald would let him volunteer on the dig. It wasn't unknown for walkers to get sucked in. The barn door was stiff, and she shoved it with her shoulder, arms wrapped around the unwieldy drum. She didn't notice the body at first. Something was wrong, she knew, and for a moment, once she'd placed the drum in the corner with the others, she looked around. Nothing was obviously out of place, except that one of Roger's stepladders had fallen over, next to a damp patch on the floor. 3 kayaks stood on their ends against one wall, their paddles alongside. Planks of wood and coils of rope, camping stoves, boxes which contained goodness knew what. Roger was meticulous about everything being kept in good order, and tidied his area of the store after each course. She kept one section for herself, or rather for the bunkhouse. Tins of paint, decorating supplies, tools, a pressure washer and lawnmower, assorted rakes and brooms, boxes of nails and screws. She went to right the steps and stopped before her hand could reach them. Something moved above her in the airflow generated by the door as it swung slowly shut. 2 black walking shoes, scuffs of brown mud clinging to the soles and filling the grooves. Above them, black trousers and hands stiff and grotesquely swollen, like fat, mottled sausages. A red jacket. Marianne didn't look any further. Her stomach twisted in on itself, kneaded and wrung, forcing hot vomit into her mouth. She flung herself to the door and clawed it open. On her knees, in the damp cinder of the yard, she spewed her breakfast onto the ground.